So what when we're talking about storage, like what's the temperature ranges for most of these products that we're aiming for? Because that's one of the big challenges for us is we have these. It's a tight range, right?
Very.
And it has to stay within that range, and it can't go out. And then you have telltales right on the actual products themselves to make sure they don't go out. You want to talk about that temperature management a little bit?
So red cells and thawed plasma need to be maintained at refrigerated temperatures. So that's between 2 to 8 degrees C. Anything above that is when we start getting alarms. So we can go up to 10, but we like to see fridges once they get up to 8 means something's wrong, and why isn't it where it's supposed to be?
We're set at 6.
Well, we're set at 6,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
regulations.
It's trending in the wrong direction, yeah.
Yes. So we have a very tight window, and like I said, those devices need to be monitored quarterly. Alarms, double alarms, extra alarms. By the way, there's another alarm when that happens. So platelets, again, only good for 5 days. We're going to get them on day 2 if we're lucky, 3 most likely, maybe even 4. Those are like to be at room temperature, and so those have to maintain 22 degrees Celsius, and they like to be rocked. They don't like to just sit there. They like to be rocked. So
Be in
they're
their
only-
cradle, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they like to be rocked for their entire time as much as possible. They can be off the rocker for about 24 hours, so that's how we can ship them to where they need to go. But yeah, they like to be
Well,
agitated.
they'll get agitated in shipping, but
Yes.
not rocked.
Right? Exactly. Kicked across the
Yeah,
airport there.
Well, I've been on Cleveland streets, even if we're currying them, it's
just a
it's
little
well
off.
shaken, not stirred, right?
Yeah. And then the cryo and the plasma like to be frozen. That has to be frozen negative 20 degrees C or colder. And then once thawed, and I said the plasma has to be at that same 2 to 8. And then the cryo is a room temperature product. So it doesn't go in a rock, or it doesn't go in a room temperature incubator. It just sits on my counter and then will die after that 4 to 6 hours, depending on how it was manipulated.
Wow.
So everything has a time and everything has a temperature range in which it should be at. So when we are looking at the trauma setting on the scenes, what kind of device can we maintain that temperature at? What kind of device is going to get us to alarm and alarm you, alarm me, and then everybody recognizes when that alarm goes off that something's wrong and we need to act. So
There are little devices, and these are Vicky's favorite, but they're little color change strips.
yeah.
Yeah,
Favorite.
see? That some facilities will put on their units where as soon as that unit is out of
Gets
refrigeration,
out of spec, yeah.
yeah, it turns red or some color. Each one is a little
A
different.
little different, yeah.
Some go black, some go red. But that's your signal that, okay, this thing can't go back in the fridge. It's use it within this time frame that's dictated by whichever group that you're with, or it's toast. It's going in the trash can. And all of that is dealing with rapid bacterial growth. Something comes to room temperature, and it is basically a giant nutrient broth.
Oh, yeah.
It has the potential to grow bacteria.
Of course.
So you have X amount of time to use it once it's out of our fridge. Otherwise, throw it away, because sepsis would not be a great alternative.
Kind of on that topic, do you guys want to talk about how much it costs for? We talked about I want to donate my blood, but I don't want anyone to pay for it. Well, there's inherent costs in just having this process of a blood pipeline, right? You want to talk about what the cost is per unit of blood, plasma, FFP?
Matt probably knows it better than me, but we'll be very general with these prices. 'Cause, like I said, we have to remember there's at minimum 6 or 8 things that are tested for infectious disease markers. They're using like DNA, PCR, NAT, those kind of testing. So it's not just shaking a tube and saying, oh, this is negative.
Yeah.
So these are very molecular designed things. And then there's labeling. And so sometimes there's upcharge for certain things. We get really detailed when we start talking about neonates. But a regular RBC, non-ONEG, is going to be about $230, $250 to the hospital. Platelets are in the $600-$700 range for us. Cryo is about 80-ish
For a single.
for a single.
Yeah, $360 for a pool.
And then our plasma is the cheapest product at like $40 or $55, I think.
Yeah. Then again, you have stat fees. So we have that
There's other
trauma that comes in.
other
I need
variables
to
for sure.
replenish quickly. There's a stat fee.
Yeah.
I have a antibody patient If it's a rare antibody that I can't screen in-house and I have to order it from one of our suppliers, I'm looking at costs for the antigen typing and then a stat fee also to bring that in. So depending on the situation, it can get pricey quite quickly. And that's just our costs. That's not even, accounting for our tech time and everything else and our reagents to process that once it comes in.
Yeah, and then the delivery of it
Yeah.
by the provider.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, we have to be realistic. Like I said, it is a good faith donate, but everything costs something.
Yeah.
And so we have to pay for what we want. And then, unfortunately, with the O-negs and ABs, those things can be upcharged. But that's okay. I mean, we're trying to do something for the patient. And so I will write that check every week that it comes to me because we did what we could for the patient. Now, we don't try to go crazy and absorb products that we don't need, right? We also recognize that maybe somebody else needs this. My inventory levels are fine. I don't need this today. So then that's out in the community for somebody else to take. So we're not just hoarding things to be hoarding things either.
So looking at drug costs, if you're at the $232.50, which is I think is actually pretty cheap, I saw typical red blood cells are about $500 as a general cost. At that point, it's the most expensive drug in our drug box if it was in our drug box.
And that's for the packed red cell.
I'm just
Let's
talking
not
packed,
talk about
yeah,
the whole blood. We're talking closer to 1,000.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if it's whole blood or even packed red blood cells, it's still if we had it in our drug box, it's the most expensive drug outside of
platelets.
Yeah, but for us, if we're talking about costs in that box costs us about $1,000 in drug costs.
Just pharmaceutical
pharmaceuticals.
raw cost.
Yeah. And that's at bulk discount that University Hospitals buys
absolutely.
at.
Absolutely.
So
And most of that cost is glucagon. No, I'm just kidding.
you're not wrong. So that's why I kind of bring that up, is that as we develop our process for this, is understanding the costs and not wanting to waste precious product. We want to make sure we want it to be used. And I work with the blood bank colleagues at Portage, and they are on it. Like, I lost a unit of blood, and they get upset about that because they want it to go to somebody. But sometimes there's gonna be loss.
And I think we understand that too, but we still have those times where it's like, do we really just get that and have to throw it away because it came back to me in improper storage?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just those simple things.
Yeah.
Like, I sent it to you correctly and you didn't return it correctly. Had you returned it the way I sent it to you, it'd go back on my shelf, but now I have to throw it away, and so we get a little mad.
Yeah. Why did you take my bag of ice out of my cooler? Simple stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
Goofy stuff. But in the heat of the moment, you don't know what's going on in that OR room or that trauma bay.
Yeah.
They're probably just chucking stuff to get to what they need. And they're like, oh, this is the one left over.
I will be happy to have you guys come look at a trauma for us because it is organized chaos.
I've been drug into a couple rooms recently by our anesthesia colleagues, and I can happily say that even though I'm an adrenaline junkie, that is not my world.
Yeah.
That was intense.
And we recognize that too. That's why. But to be fair, a system might have been broken. Let's see if we can fix that system.
Absolutely.
And that's why we, was this intentional? Was it an accident? I understand your hands were full, so it just thought like a good idea to throw the platelet in the same cooler with the ice. But now I have to throw that platelet away.
Yeah.
So.
Any other risks? We kind of touched on hemolytic reactions. I want to just kind of broadly leave it there because that could be a whole podcast by itself. But any other risks and complications that obviously I'm aware of that's going to happen with these blood products, but if we were to roll this out to EMS, there's some other things we talked about, infection control. There's still, even though we do all this testing on these blood products, that there still is a risk that we could give you a product that has some infection in it. We obviously test for hepatitis C, but that's my big talking point with patients because hepatitis C is very prevalent as an infection. Do you guys want to talk about those risks at all?
So I would just say overall, transfusion is not 100% safe. It's as safe as we can make it based on the testing that we have. That's why we have the PCR and the NAT testing. Matt can go into the other wonderful things that he's found. But as a EMS going forward, and if you're going to play by UH rules, you're going to play by the AABB standards, you need to be able to recognize transfusion reactions, and that's a real focus. So, I mean, the easiest one would be a hemolytic reaction. I mean, your patient's going to crash, but
Yes.
there's something as simple as just an allergic reaction, a couple hives, you
Yep.
know, depending on the thing. And then we have things that are circulatory overload. So we hear about taco a lot. And that would probably be another big one in trauma, especially when you're thinking MTP, is that circulatory overload.
Yep.
And then we have that infamous trolley that gets everybody every time. And then that's, I mean, we take all those seriously. We want you to recognize those things. We want you to call them. We want to investigate those. Because either A, it's your patient. Maybe next time we pre-medicate, put a little note in there so they don't have that allergic reaction. B, it actually might be something else related to the donor that, as Matt's going to talk about, the markers that aren't being caught. And so that's where you get the trolley. And so we send that information back to the blood center. They investigate the donor and determine if is the donor still eligible to donate based on what we've seen
Based
with
on
that
what
reaction.
yeah.
So identifying transfusion reactions in any setting is the most important part. And that's what AABB focuses on. Every transfusionist should be able to identify that a transfusion reaction is occurring.
Has occurred.
Yep.
And then to follow up with that, you go to donate, they ask you that health questionnaire. So have you been out of the country? Have you been exposed to X, Y, and Z? If somebody says no to all these and they're qualified, they donate that day, and they come in 6 months and all of a sudden they test positive for hepatitis C or HIV. All of a sudden they have babesia. I just handled that one.
Okay.
It's a thing. It
yeah.
happens.
I went on my honeymoon and I came back to donate blood, not thinking of it. They asked me those questions, and they said, "Yeah, you can't donate." I'm like,
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Yep, deferred you are.
Yes.
So that donor does come back, and all of a sudden they're positive for something. What then happens? So they have criteria where they pull the previous donations up to a certain date, and they will send me an email that says, hey, these 3, 4, 10, doesn't matter how many units, came to you guys. Can you tell us what happened to them?
Right.
So we go down the list and we say, okay, these 4 were transfused, this one was
here, this one-
discarded,
Yep.
this one I sent to Portage, so I got to let them know what's going on. I send them a copy of the notice. So anything that's still in my inventory, they have me sequester. They'll bring that donor in again and do confirmatory testing. So, okay, it was just a hiccup, everything's negative, you can use those units, nothing else has to happen, everything's okay. Or, donor went in, they got their hepatitis B booster, so they popped on
Popped
the
on it, sure.
screening,
Mhm.
but they can prove within 28 days of that donation that they had that vaccine, they're okay, they're relisted, it's fine. If they come back and they're positive, we have protocols where we have to find the patient, the patient's physician, the next of kin if they're deceased, and we notify them and say, the unit you got tested negative, but his 5th donation after that came back positive. So we're going to supply free testing for you. You can get your spouse tested. You could get your kids tested. We can bring you all in, make sure you're as safe as we can possibly make you. And hopefully you're negative. If you're positive, we have counseling services through our blood suppliers.
Sure.
CDC has a lot of great information. They make it as safe as they possibly can, while knowing that somebody could potentially be in a window period.
Yeah.
But of all the blood products that come through, the notifications that we actually have to act on are absolutely minimal. So,
But that being said, just a little push here into that EMS emergency world.
Yep.
That is why the FDA makes us document vein-to-vein transfusion. So they know the donor and they know every step of that process. So when I do give you that whole blood unit or that packed cell and use it on that trauma that just showed up, I need to know who that patient is. So if there is a look back, I can say this person got it and I
Yep.
can follow up with
Yeah.
them. So that's some things we struggle with, especially in a trauma situation. Again, that heat of the moment. Oh, by the way, I took this red cell and I didn't tell the blood bank, and now I don't know who it went to because since then 3 more traumas have come in.
Sure.
So that's where an emphasis that we're trying to push is if you're going to use the emergency release blood, we need to know so that we can follow up with those lookbacks if they come across.
yeah. Even if you spike it and you just throw it in the trash, I still need to know. I need to know
Yeah.
where that thing went.
Right.
So we have processes. We have a little work group now where we say, this one disappeared overnight. Who'd you take it on? So we're getting the follow-ups. We're getting the notification that we need. But just for that protection of the patient, it's, vein to vein.
Yeah, and even in the helicopter setting, if that person doesn't show up at our ED, hey, I used no neg and I sent this patient to St. E's in Youngstown. This is what I know about the patient.
Yeah.
We can put that information. So at least, hey, we know it went to Youngstown. We can update them. And if we have enough information on the patient, they can follow up.
Yeah, well, you got access to our charting, so.
Yeah, yep. They've been great about bringing us everything. Transfer papers, the AirMed is, they're on.
Too much. All I need was these 3 things.
It's like, you can keep those 15 things.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want this one.
One of the other complications and risky things is I think that I know it's borne out from the conversations we've had with talking about bringing blood into the EMS world as like religious beliefs. So do you want to talk a little bit about some religious beliefs, and both from the patient maybe receiving or what they're willing to receive, as well as maybe even the
Provider,
practitioner,
yeah.
the provider willingness to do something?
Right. So, a provider always has the purpose to help save a life. And so there's certain things that a transfusion medicine attending might be able to help you with to help you try to do that. Now, we do recognize that there are certain religions that prohibit the use of transfused human blood products. And we see that a lot, and we just kind of work with it. So we know there's some pharmaceuticals that can help those people. The most common one you'll hear about is Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's pharmaceuticals that might be able to help. None of them are going to be as good, unfortunately,
yeah.
per technology is designed now, as the real thing. But I know our TM attendings get in conversations. They've had patients where they've had to be in a situation where it's like, well, they won't take this. This is the ideal product to give her this protocol. What about this, or this? Some religions are very strict, and it's patient. Some patients are kind of like, that one's not bothering me, I'll do that one. So it's really, unfortunately, not having that conversation with the patient. But when a trauma situation, when that patient can't talk to you, you just have to do your best. But yeah, from a physician standpoint, like I said, there are some pharmaceuticals that might be able to help you. If you have questions about that, you can ask your pharmacist. And honestly, sometimes the pharmacist will reach out to the transfusion medicine service
Sure,
and
of
be
course.
like, what do you know about this? Because not a lot of them are kept on the shelf. And so they're for comfort use only. And so we'd have to bring them in. But there's things out there. They're not great, but they're out there for those people who don't feel comfortable taking that human blood donation.
So right now we don't have blood on EMS vehicles as of recording this in November of 2024. But we do have, if an EMS agency thinks they need blood on scene for, like, say, a bad trauma that's entrapped, we do have blood on the helicopter.
Yeah.
So helicopters in the area do carry 2 units of O group. Are they strictly O negative?
They are O-neg
Okay.
as of today.
Okay. That can change,
Because we
right?
have O-negs to put on there. So, and we've had this meeting with just the on-site trauma teams too. Like, we've been to a point where it's like, the O-negs are so bad that we need to think about just giving all your patients in the ED O-pos red cells.
I've seen some of those emails.
Those conversations do occur. So,
Sure.
I mean, like I said, good stewards recognizing and trying to give the best product to the patient of what we have in the bank. So, but yeah.
So I think that UH and probably our regional partners, whether that's Cleveland Clinic or even EMS agencies, I think that we've come to the conclusion that we're working on this, and this is going to be a regional approach to help solve this problem. I'll guess this is a question for you: is do you think we'll see blood products on any other vehicles?
Short answer is yes. How that's going to be utilized is the deployment plan is going to be the interesting part. And I mean, we were talking about this off camera. Is this is kind of like like the stroke mobile thing where there's a mobile stroke unit. Well, where we really need that is in the underserved population outside in the rural setting where transport time that would be the ideal setting, but pocketbooks are limited. We can't have billions of dollars worth of these things circling the inner city, and the deployment plan is probably going to look, departments or collections of departments, consortiums of departments, or may have a single resource that they can share amongst themselves, or a hospital system will, locate in a strategic area, some sort of response vehicle, and the protocol developed around that for when that will be deployed, right? What triggers this? Now, the obvious low-hanging fruit is, entrapped patient, or so. Okay, you start headed to that, but especially in the city where it doesn't make sense to wait for the blood to get there. In most cases, if you can get the patient to the trauma center and requisite blood in the same amount of time, so it's really going. I don't think there's going to be a quick solution, and I think it's going to evolve over time, right? I think there'll be a bunch of pilots, and then we'll aggregate that data and say, well, yeah, you did it, but there was just the use profile isn't there. Maybe we need to move this south and west and north, and I think it's opened up a whole extra avenue in our out of hospital EMS care, but it's also greatly complicated that, right? It's good. So as it stands right now, the out of hospital piece of that is the rotorcraft, right?
Yep.
And us, and like you said, all of our regional entities can bring you that blood for those cases where there's entrapment, or you can't get them to blood any faster than you can get a helicopter to them. I think there'll be some pockets or some situations. Weather is really the big thing, but now we've gotten a blood distribution product that has this. Weather comes in, you put it in a vehicle. It's just done this, right? It's halved that for the same amount of time. So I think we're just gonna have to deal with the variables that we have, and nothing's going to be perfect, and we can always guarantee the exact same thing on every single day. It's always going to be multivariable, but yes, I think there's going to be some sort of distribution change, but is it going to be, I guess the important part is it going to be on every fire department ambulance and every ambulance in Northeast Ohio and every ambulance in the state of Ohio? That is just 100% technically impossible, right? Everybody can't support it. Everybody can't be doing it. There's just not enough. But for right now, rotor's the answer.
And I think maybe you guys even said earlier that you got an email today, conversations of maybe deploying blood products to a high-risk situation if you're sending TAC med out or a SWAT team out.
Yeah, that's that protocolized dispatch piece of that, right? And that can't be, hey, my fire department wants to do it this way, or my department wants to do it that way. Again, it's going to have to be a regional kind of consortium. It's like we all agree that this city had this type of call going on, and that took precedent over this guy over here, even though he needed blood too. There's going to be those double, triple hits where it's all going to have to be protocolized and flushed out, and there's going to have to be a lot of after action for a long time to tune that. So, and the nice part is it's happening in a few other places in the United States, and there's models to look at, and there's some data we can absorb and kind of apply to our situation in Northeast Ohio, but it's still going to be, I think a lot of it's going to be kind of trial and error, and molding it to our needs, right? So even the short term, city of Cleveland is really looking at this the heaviest, and they're only talking about one or two vehicles carrying it. They're not putting it on every truck, right? They're going to have it available. Of course, I'm interested to see what that usage profile, what their protocols look like, and how they deploy it. So.
Yeah, because as November 2024, we've only had 3 meetings, and we're still trying to decide what kind of blood products are we going to put on these
What are we
things?
even going to use?
We're
right.
not even talking about a hub wheel kind of system. We're still trying to have an agreement about what is the appropriate product to put on these rigs if we do these rigs, and how many of those products go on there.
How many? Yeah. The nice thing is we are talking about that as a region. It's not it's not in a vacuum. It's just like, hey, we're doing this, and you guys can follow along or not. It's we're trying to standardize that for all of the players in our broader region, right outside of the reach of UH. We're talking about the Cleveland Clinic, Metro, and everybody else that's in this area. So there is at least a standardized approach. I don't want to say it's going to be absolutely standardized, but it's going to be an approach that everybody is going to be aware of. So,
any other advances you guys see coming down the pipeline in the transfusion medicine that's going to be applicable to EMS in the future? We this month we have ECMO. ECPR, so the ECMO program that they do up at Cleveland, and I kind of foresee that that's going to be the next big thing in the next, hopefully during my career in the next 20 years, that I'll be cannulating cardiac arrest patients, pushing a button to turn them on pump to buy them more time. I think that is going to, I hope that the data can suggest that, and I can offer, if they're talking about having 30 to 50% success rate versus just 10%, that's fantastic. I want to do that. I want to be on the leading edge to do that. So do you guys see any of innovations in transfusion medicine blood products coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so I was in some meetings last week with one of the blood suppliers, and he was, basically a dried bolus of red cells that then will be reconstituted and can be used in a emergency situation till you can get to the blood product. So those things are out there. They're coming. I think even, I saw something about it on the news. But again, blood being blood. Now, in the hospital setting, the blood bank's kind of last to know about anything. And then when we know about it, but, the organ boxes and stuff like that need the blood products. So we've been involved with that. And I just read it on the news the other day, and they're all like, oh, this is a new thing. I'm like, this is not a new thing. This has been here for a while. But, yeah, the use of blood to help patients in other ways. With the sickle cell patient, the new FDA standard for pediatrics with the CAR-T genetic manipulation, but we have to support them until they can get that transfusion and then, I don't want to say cure, in quotes, ear quotes, if you could see me, sickle cell. So are we seeing those technologies? Yes, and only when they evolve. How do we support them with the red cells, either up until that can happen or during that process to get them on the machine or off the machine or so forth. So, but like I said, there's definitely no blood that you can just turn the faucet on now and put it in a bag and send it out the way. So we still sit and we wait. Like I said, even when we hear about these new things, it's always the disclaimer until you can get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
So
buys time.
Exactly. Yeah. Buys time.
Yeah, from a trauma setting and being out in the field, the only things that we're really seeing are changes to our blood products. Like once you get in, our testing's still the same. Our machines sometimes can, add a test or two that we were sending out previously that we can get done quicker now. They're looking at pathogen reduction for cryo. So when you thought it's 5 days instead of 6 hours, excuse me. There's the cold store platelets floating around in the world now where you have a longer out date, but the guidance is kind of iffy on when to give it. And, it's basically just trauma, like Vicky said before. Once it gets back to you because it didn't get used in that 2-week window, you have nobody to give it to. Right. So they are changing, manipulating some products where they might be able to impact that trauma setting and those ambulances and AirMed even. But right now we're just kind of waiting to see what the final say is on those products. So, when these things come up and these discussions come up and that first meeting hit our docket for potentially supplying the ambulances, the first thing you think is, oh man, here we go. This is just more stuff for an already busy place to take care of. But it's really neat seeing the impact and the potential outcome. Like one patient, that doc that shows up the window and says, we're good. You guys show up with AirMed and you're like, we gave our 2 units, but we're cool. It does feel good. Yeah, so right. It'll be work monitoring all these changes in these products and potentially validating them to come in. It's work, but I think at the end of the day, Vicky and I are both happy to check this stuff out because if it helps everybody, that's the business we're in.
Yeah, our blood bank technologies aren't going to change. I mean, molecular now instead of shaking a tube, but same result gets put out. But practices, blood transfusion practices are changing, and that's when we get most excited. Because like I said, before giving a plasma to an adult who might even be a B or AB is just, the concept is crazy.
Yeah.
But now that you read it and you understand that in an MTP kind of situation, that's okay. And so it's blood bank practices that are changing, I think, more than necessarily the
The
technologies that
technology,
we're seeing.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel like in my near 30 years, that in the resuscitation space as a whole, right? How many whiz bangs, and this is the next generation of things, and none of them are around, right? Or very few of them are still around, right?
Yeah.
Don't have the staying power, right? We're confident in the trial until we read the results.
Right.
Exactly.
It's the whole waiting game. I think from a lab perspective, our most famous thing was, that testing company has to do 1 drop of blood. And then it's not a thing.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in jail.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of it's monitor, wait. When somebody says it's appropriate, we'll be the first ones to bring it in.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming out, and I hope you guys enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, this has been great.
Yeah, this is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Again, I want everyone out there that's either listening or watching, if university hospitals, EMSI, blood bank, trauma people aren't already, if you don't find one of our programs out there donating blood, Google on the internet, donate blood, go donate as often and as frequently as you can. I think the best problem we could probably have in the future is we have too much blood, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have all the O negatives to put everywhere we need it, and babies can have their AB plasma, and that would be the best news, best outcome we could have.
Of course.
We do have
We do, yeah. Here we have
challenge coins for you guys.
Oh,
Thank you
very
for
cool.
as our
Awesome.
token, literally a token of our appreciation.
Yes.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
so no monetary value, but I might buy you a beer if we ever run into each
It'd
other.
be a
in
cheap
the-
beer.
Well, I think we
Don't
just
worry.
gave you a couple more ideas for podcasts during this whole thing. So,
Right. If you get me out of the blood bank, I don't need a beer. I will happily come hang out with you guys.
Just come talk for.
I enjoy it. We both like making these connections for when we are talking about
Of
that
course.
new protocol that comes up. We have a familiar face that we can really bounce those ideas off of that might not necessarily be one that we're comfortable bringing up cold turkey with somebody. So, seeing you the first time and then getting to come talk to you again, there's a comfort level where I know if we were in one of these meetings, we could say, can we throw this on the floor, and having you and now you, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
And
So,
sometimes it's about what kind of sticks to the wall, right? Maybe
Yeah.
I have a half-brained idea that Scott thinks is half-brained, but he's like, there's a good,
There's a sliver. Yeah.
there's something that's good in there that we can work on. So,
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you guys again.
well, thanks.
Oh,
for
thank
coming.
you.
And
This has been great.
check out and get ready for our live podcast, and go donate blood. Thanks, guys.
thank you.